Okay, well, to continue a simplistic line of questioning, then,
Yeah.
why are the gas prices going up if there is no supply problem?
Well, the oil is a fungible market. Libya produces some very high-quality oil, which mostly goes to Europe. The Europeans are going to have to get oil from somewhere else to replace it. So some of those barrels that may have come to the U.S. from Africa and, mostly from West Africa, will probably be diverted to Europe.
About what percentage of our petrochemical needs is taken care of by imports?
Well, about 2/3 of our crude is imported at this time. We produce almost all of our natural gas, so that's not a problem.
So about 2/3 of it is imported, and those come primarily from which countries, Mark?
The four big ones, and are Canada, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela.
Venezuela. Ah.
Yeah, not always the most dependable supplier, but
yes. It depends on how Mr. Chavez feels about us today.
That's true.
That's true. So there are uncertainties there as well.
Well, and even domestically, say when there was the BP oil spill in the Gulf, I mean, there are problems here at home.
Indeed. So Mark mentioned Saudi Arabia. What is the outlook for Saudi Arabia in terms of political unrest that might, or other factors that might affect its position? Let's start with Adam.
It's a good question. I think if I had to guess, I think it'd be very, very unlikely to see Saudi Arabia see sort of the levels of unrest we've seen in countries like Egypt or certainly like Libya. That said, there have been some small-scale protests, especially in the eastern part of the country, which is near Bahrain, which you were talking about earlier, but it's also where the bulk of the country's oil is produced. So, of course, the Saudi authorities have been very quick to put down those protests, and I suspect it's likely to continue that they'll take a hard line against unrest there.
Does that jibe with your experience, Eric Watkins?
Yes, I think that over the years, the Shia population, which is in the eastern part of the kingdom, Saudi Arabia, they've had their issues, and every now and then you see them, expressing their concerns, expressing their desires, and so forth. And I think that what we're seeing now fits into that more general pattern. Saudi Arabia is a pretty stable country. It has a sizable population, about 28 million people, but it also has a pretty good per capita. And I think one of the more interesting features about Saudi Arabia is I think it's close to 25% of the national budget is devoted to education. They realize that they've got a problem there with unemployment among the youth. Even the CEO of Saudi Aramco has underlined this in a number of speeches over the past year. And what they're trying to do, the kingdom's, the government in general, is trying to head off problems, especially amongst the youth. You can have some protests here and there. There can be some Facebook sort of protests. But I don't think you're going to see anything like the unrest you've seen in the other countries. And I don't think that any unrest is going to cause any instability in their production ability.
How much of the Saudi annual budget is from oil revenues?
I'd say about 95%.
About 95%. And in Russia, Andrew Kramer, what would be the answer to that question? How much of what Mr. Putin, Mr. Medvedev have to spread around comes from oil and natural gas?
I believe the number is about 60% of the federal budget.
So these are both very oil-dependent economies, and also two of the greatest holders of reserves. In contrast to Russia, then, Saudi Arabia can in Andrew Kramer's terms, open a spigot and turn a valve or two and give more oil on any given day. Is that correct, Mark Schenk?
Most definitely. We have evidence that both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have substantially increased production since the Libya crisis has deepened.
And that, as you said earlier, also affects the supply to the United States.
Yeah, most definitely.
Right.
And the Saudi barrels tend not to be exactly the same as those from Libya. Refiners need a certain type of oil for certain to make certain products like diesel or gasoline, but they might be as close enough to match.
I'm getting quite a lesson here. One of the interesting things that's been mentioned is that not all oil is the same. It comes from different places, and therefore it affects what cost at refineries and this sort of thing.
Most definitely. And how much gasoline or diesel you can extract from that barrel. Libya happens to produce very high quality, very much sought after oil,
and which has its high quality, and therefore there's less you have to do with it to make.
Exactly. There's a lot less sulfur. It can be easily broken up into high value products by refiners.
I see. And how would the and Eric, perhaps you can answer this for us. How would the oil from the other sources differ in terms of quality?
Well, generally, you're talking about, to keep ourselves on the simple points, you're talking about three main grades of oil: light, medium, and heavy. And Libyan oil is very, very light. And the lighter the oil, as was just mentioned, the less refining you have to do. The heavier the oil, the more refining. And it costs more to get really heavy oil out of the ground. It costs more to transport it. It costs more to refine it. It's just a more expensive oil all around. So anybody who's in the oil business is going to want to find the lightest oil possible in the environment where it's easiest to extract.
And the easiest to transport.
That's why Saudi oil has such a premium on it. It's easy to extract. There's a lot of light oil there.
And Saudi oil, is that of the same quality?
Well, I think that the Saudis have said that their oil is an exact match with the Libyan oil that's going into Europe. But, exact means that a refiner might have to change their standards a little bit. It has a lot to do with emissions and how much they kind of refine out of the oil. So they would have to change their standards a bit. But Saudi Arabia also is not sending its oil directly into Europe. Some of it is, but what they're doing also is arranging for oil from West Africa to go up into Europe. And West African oil is closer to Libyan oil.
Ah, I see. What about Russian oil, Andrew Kramer?
Well, the Russian oil is actually not of great quality. It's typically the Ural blend crude, and they take different grades of oil and feed it into the same pipeline for the long journey from Siberia to markets. And because of this, there's a discount on when Russia sells its oil. But
and it goes primarily to Europe. Is that the case? Or how about to China?
There's some new exports going to China. The pipeline began working just this year.
Well, I mention this because in addition to the United States and, of course, Western Europe, there's a great need, an increasing need for oil in the fast-growing economies of China. Let me ask, as we are coming down to the final moments of this program, to ask each of you to project for us, and I want to relieve you. I'm not going to ask you what the price of gas at the pump is going to be in these next few summer driving months, but I'm going to ask you to look into the future of oil production and what these, from a democratic point of view, exciting and challenging things in the Middle East are going to mean to oil production? Not much, or are things going to change in the near future? Eric, let's start with you.
Well, again, that's a very, very good question, and I'm fumbling here with my crystal ball.
Don't drop it.
See parts of dark clouds in places. For the foreseeable future is a degree of be all day for a while, I think. It's uncertain, but often it's a very small amount.
Well, I think
here.
Yes. I think that it's sort of like fog coming in over the Pacific. Is that as you're sitting there, and well, what about your transmission is breaking up a little bit here in the studio. Adam, are you still with us?
I think so.
Good. Well, can you give us just as far as you can look ahead reasonably?
Well, I think what your previous guest is saying is exactly right. That I mean, for the short term, I think things are going to remain pretty uncertain because as long as traders in New York and London and Singapore and places like that who buy and sell the world's oil are seeing the headlines from the Middle East, they're gonna remain concerned, and that's going to keep prices fairly high. Longer term, I think it all depends really on what happens in these countries and how things shake out. I'm not sure production is going to be so much affected, but the sort of the headline risk, as the banks call it, could keep prices high for a while.
Yeah. And this is a huge, multifaceted story. Andrew Kramer, are you still with us?
I am, yes.
Yes. Can you give us, from the perspective of Russia, a quick peek into the near future?
Well, I think that the unrest in the Middle East will make Russia a more attractive place for Western oil companies to do business relative to the Middle East. And this, in 3 or 4 years you might see a more fruitful relationship on energy issues between Russia and Western Europe and perhaps the United States. One thing that Russia exports a lot of natural gas, and when oil prices go up relative to natural gas prices, you see some countries, some consumers using natural gas in new ways, such as in Lithuania, where they use natural gas in cars quite a bit.
I'm going to
be a factor in the United States at some point as well.
Thank you. Mark, I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to give us a quick peek at the near future in the U.S.
Well, gasoline prices tend to go up as we head towards summer anyway, so we'll probably see that. We'll move on the headlines, and as long as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the major producers stay stable, we're not looking for any major move higher.
Okay. One final personal observation. Of course, we've been through all this before. 8 of the top 10 oil producers are in the Middle East. And as one Libyan commented just before Allied air power arrived to assist, quote, "We all know it, oil makes the world go round," unquote. What's different this time? The something happening involves demands for regime change and democracy across the region. And Russia, which has been quietly becoming one of the top oil producers, is now very much in the mix. Thanks to our guests, Mark Schenck, Andrew Kramer, Adam Schreck, and Eric Watkins. Our director is Travis McMillan. Audio by Pat Akers. Our video producer is Tim Wall. Rebecca Wolfson is executive producer. The other producers and global journalists are David Cawthon, Ryan Kress, and Jessica Popovic. Stephanie Tabor is the production assistant. This is Byron Scott for Global Journalists, reminding you that you can download, view, or listen to this show, plus additional features at globaljournalists.org.